Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our weekly webinar series that occurs here on our Facebook page every Friday at noon. My name is Brianna. I'm a Sustainable Transportation Vermont intern, and I'm here to introduce our speaker for today, who is James Kunstler, and he is the author of over 20 books, including The Geography of Nowhere, The City in Mind, The Long Emergency, Too Much Magic, and The World Made by Hand novel series. He writes a twice-weekly blog, Mondays and Fridays, and does a monthly podcast as well. Right now, he's living in Washington County, New York, and today he's going to talk about how transportation is part of the crisis facing America today, from overbuilt roadways to streets that ignore the people that actually live on them, and how a new way of thinking about transportation as people walk, bike, and drive less may be the way out. So I'm going to bring James up now. Hi, James.
Hi, Brianna.
Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.
So I gave a very brief introduction. So would you mind telling us a little bit more about yourself and how you became so involved in transportation?
Well, I started out as a newspaper reporter. And one of the first things that happened to me in my professional life was I covered the OPEC oil embargo of 1973. And that really made an impression on me because the newspaper I worked for, which was the Albany, New York newspaper, had just relocated from downtown out to this heroic boulevard of suburban commercial crapola. And so you really saw the whole suburban thing kind of crash within a few days. And, we had another replay of that in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution and the disturbances that entailed in the oil industry and especially gas prices. But, after that, we really didn't have a whole lot of trouble. And a bunch of things went on in the meantime in the oil industry. One was that beginning in the mid-1980s, the last really great discoveries of the oil age came online. That would be the Alaskan Prudhoe Bay, North Slope oil fields, the Siberian oil fields, and the North Sea. All of these were non-OPEC oil fields. And they gave us a good 20 years of easy living. And the price of oil went down consistently from the mid-1980s when Ronald Reagan was president to a low of like $11 a barrel in 1999. And then with the new millennium, we started to have problems. And it was largely about the fact that it was costing more and more to get the oil out of the ground, especially in terms of what's called the energy cost of energy, which is, for example, how many barrels of oil does it take, or how many barrels of oil do you get from an investment of 1 barrel of oil equivalent energy going into the whole endeavor of drilling and everything. And, at the height of the American industrial orgy, the ratio was something like 100 to 1. For every 1 barrel of energy equivalent you put into the task, you got 100 barrels back. So it worked pretty well in our favor. And it started to fall apart, in the 1970s when our own production peaked and it started going down and we had to import more and more from other people. And then a lot of other things happened to make oil more expensive. We were relying more on deep sea drilling, which requires you not only to go miles under the water, but then more miles under the rock under the water. And the business end of the drill is so far away from the human beings trying to manage it that catastrophes can happen, like the blowout in the Gulf of Mexico. And all of these things entail gigantic costs. So the cost of getting the oil out of the ground was getting worse and worse, and higher and higher. And by about 2007, we were down to producing about just under 5 million barrels a day in the USA and using 20 million barrels a day. So we were importing one way or another almost 15 million barrels a day of oil. And around 2008, the price started to go up and up and up. And by 2008, it was over $140 a barrel. And there's a basic kind of equation in this whole thing that oil over $75 a barrel in today's money crushes economies. It's just too expensive to run an industrial economy the way we've got it set up. And oil under $75 a barrel crushes oil companies and they go bankrupt. So anyway, we did the shale oil thing. That came along, and that was largely a financial stunt that was enabled by Federal Reserve zero interest rate policies that made a lot of capital available. But the trouble was that the shale oil drillers couldn't make a red cent drilling shale oil. And they just kept on burning through all this capital. And now a whole bunch of them are going bankrupt. Oil production has fallen 2 million barrels a day just since the end of last year. The shale oil miracle, so-called, was a very successful stunt. We raised U.S. oil production from under 5 million barrels a day to almost 13 million barrels a day at its peak in 2019. But now that is tanking because the companies can't make any oil, make any money. The companies are going bankrupt. And so we're back in this predicament with our energy supply. That's only part of it, because we must remember that the economy is an energy economy. It's not just a money and capital economy. The money and capital is really a claim on future energy or future work done, because the energy we use, the fossil fuels, are capable of doing so much for us. They accomplish so much work for us. And when the energy equation fails, the capital and money equation tends to fail. And that's what's happened. And that's one of the reasons why we're having these heroic and sometimes incomprehensible interventions by the Federal Reserve to prop up what remains of the financial part of the economy, while the on-the-ground real part of the economy of jobs and activities is kind of drying up. And all of these things have tremendous implications for how we live and how we get around, and what kind of how we're going to construct the human settlements on the terrain that we occupy. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
So.
You did. Speaking about where we live and how we drive or commute, could you talk a little bit about how you claim that a lot of the streets that people live on were not built for the people that actually live on the street? Could you explain that concept a little bit more?
Well, I have what I call my new theory of history, which is that things happen because they seem like a good idea at the time. You know,
Yeah.
World War I seemed like a good idea at the time to the leaders of the Western world. You know, they thought they were going to be riding off on beautiful cavalry horses and fine uniforms with gold epaulets, and it would be a 2-month glorious fantasy ride to glory. It turned into a 4-year industrial slaughter in the trenches that killed, a substantial number of the young men in Europe. So it wasn't a very good idea, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. Suburbanizing the United States seemed like a good idea at the time. And, we're talking about really it happens in a couple of stages. One is after Henry Ford really gets the automobile business going in the 1915, generally in that period. It really, when the First World War started, that was about the same time that Henry Ford got the assembly line underway. And that made mass motoring possible. That motoring was no longer the rich man's toy. It became the transportation for the masses. And the availability of cheap cars, which by about the early 1920s, they only cost about $300 for a Model T Ford. That started to prompt this idea that, we could develop all this real estate outside the cities and people could live there. And there was a lot of cheap land outside of American cities, and North America was a big place with a low population. So we embarked on that first wave of suburbanization. And a lot of that was kind of entailed with the boom of the 20s and all of the other industrial marvels of the time, you know, the radio and movies and flight. And, you know, all these things kind of helped each other out. So we suburbanized, but the boom of the 20s came to an end. And one of the industries that was hit the hardest was the construction and land development industry. So there was a pause during the Great Depression and then the Second World War, which followed, when not a whole lot of things got built. And when the Second World War was over, we re-embarked on the suburbanization of America with a vengeance. You know, we were the victors in this mighty battle over fascism and the forces of evil. And we, you know, it was a terrible struggle that cost a lot in lives and money. And we rewarded ourselves with a program for living that was going to be super enjoyable and comfortable and convenient. And that was suburbia. And we went and did it. Seemed like a good idea at the time. We built the interstate highway system. In the process of doing that, we deconstructed many of the really great old towns and cities that we had built in the United States. And they were fairly new. I mean, you go to European cities today, they're 1,500 years old. You know, our cities, the cities in the Midwest, the industrial towns, you know, they were only 100 years old, and we started knocking them down and taking them apart. They barely even got a chance to get good before we ruined them. And we ruined them by making them, retrofitting them for the comfort of automobiles. You know, there's something you really notice about how that works very directly on the human psyche and on our neurological programming. I've seen it in a couple of places really vividly. One was Mackinac Island, Michigan, which is kind of a resort island off of Michigan that has never allowed cars to be on it since its, you know, since its founding. And when you go there and you walk down the streets and you see streets that have never been disturbed by automobiles, you see that all of the relationships between the sequence of things on the ground, between the house or the building and the sidewalk and the dooryard and the street, all these relationships are still intact. And you see that the buildings want to be in a relationship between what is going on in the street, namely the passage of people, and you know, and the private life that exists within it. There are transition zones like porches. You know, that's the reason that we had these graceful transitions built into the buildings, so that there would be a graceful journey between the public realm of the street and the private realm of the home or the office building or, you know, the business, whatever it was. And what the car really did was disgrace the street and disgrace all the relationships between human beings and the public realm. And that's where we're stuck today after all these years. Now, this is quite apart from many of the economic deformities of having become supercar dependent. And, you know, we're facing that now. And it's working out in a strange way. A lot of people, you know, because we've been through this energy trauma with, you know, the oil prices going way up and then oil prices going way down and then, you know, shale oil and this and that. And basically the kind of the death spiral of fossil fuels and especially petroleum. There's been this wish that we could just change it out for some new technology. And that's been accompanied by a lot of what I call techno-narcissism. This idea that, you know, if we can only marshal new technologies, we'll solve all the problems of mankind. So one of the latest ones is we're going to electrify the car system and make them self-driving, and everything will be a self-driving Uber. And I'm not sure that's going to work out at all. You know, what that really is a kind of a scheme to allow people to think unrealistically that they can maintain a certain status quo. Now, in 1993, when I published The Geography of Nowhere, which was a book about the fiasco of suburbia, a nationwide organization was founded called the Congress for the New Urbanism, the CNU. And it was a coalition of architects and urban planners, municipal officials. Many of them were planning officials. Some of them were mayors and, other types. Transportation experts, traffic engineers, all kinds of people, developers, property developers, people who recognized that the suburban sprawl pattern in America was really a bad idea. It was destroying us economically, ecologically, spiritually, and every other way, and that we had to build better places. And especially, well, I think one thing that people don't get is the psychological damage that these places do to us. That the immersive ugliness of the highway strip is not just about the sheer ugliness of it. It represents something a lot deeper, which I refer to as entropy made visible. Okay, for those of you who have taken a physics class or two, you know that entropy is that force in nature that drives things towards stasis and death. And it's not a force in nature that you want to mess around with. And when all of this immersive ugliness is giving you a constant message that you are communing with death and the death of your culture and the death of the human spirit, that's a very, very bad message for human beings to get. That's, so at the deepest level, we've done ourselves tremendous harm apart from all of the economic damage and the inconveniences of convenience, of being able to hop in your car whenever you want and drive 7 miles to buy a hot dog, Yeah. And what we've managed to do is destroy all of the human scale in our surroundings, and in many ways, the joys of being in a place that is comprehensible and traversable. So I've forgotten where we're going with that question.
No, that's fine. You bring up so many more questions that I have. Adding on to the idea of it was a good idea at the time, how do you feel what actions are being made right now due to COVID, such as people moving out of urban areas and into suburbs or rural areas? Where do you think that that's going to lead us?
Well, COVID has had some very strange effects on our culture and our economy. Some of them extremely unexpected and difficult to cope with, obviously, in many ways. You can say that it accelerated some trends that were already underway. In my last several books, I've written or sort of taken the position that we are facing a situation where the cities are going to have to get smaller and contract. And the ones that are overbuilt, especially the places that are overburdened with mega structures and skyscrapers, are going to get into a lot of trouble. These skyscrapers were destined to reach a point where they would cease to be assets and they would become liabilities. And COVID has accelerated that hugely. I mean, you got the iconic office building of Manhattan, the Time Life building, was built for 5,000 workers, and now 500 people are showing up at it every day. Mm-hmm. And this is happening all across the country, and it's particularly severe in a place like Manhattan, where it's deformed the entire business model for running New York City. How are you going to run New York City when big corporations are not renting all this office space there anymore and people aren't going in there to work? But I thought that the city was probably destined to contract well before COVID, but the process would be slower. Not a trickle. I think it would. I thought that what we would see would be difficulty with tax revenues and inability to maintain the infrastructure. And that is really accelerating because so many people left New York City who were contributing a lot of tax money to the city that they're barely going to be able to run their stuff. The subway was only marginally operable, even at the height of the financialization of the economy in the, over the last after the last decade of the new millennium. But now, with tens of thousands of upper middle class taxpayers fleeing New York, their tax base is crashing. And, they're already making noises about not being able to run the MTA at nearly the same scale that they did before. And that may be some kind of a permanent condition because the more their maintenance is deferred, the more finally expensive it's going to be to rebuild the system or keep it going at all. So imagine New York without a subway system that works very well. That's going to be tough. But we're going to see a lot of this all over the country. Now, the cities are not all identical. They're not all skyscraper cities. A lot of the Sun Belt cities are mostly suburban, with a core of a few skyscrapers. Places like Houston and Atlanta, and they're going to face other challenges. Now, a lot of people are moving now from the cities to suburbs, which I think is a really grave mistake, because the suburbs are going to encounter their own range of problems that will be somewhat different from the problems of the big cities. But they'll be just as bad. A lot of them have to do, of course, with the motoring situation. And I'm sorry to circle around all this, but I think it's important to say this. A lot of people thought the motoring system would be saved by electric cars. But it turns out it doesn't matter that much how you power the cars. What's really going to probably make things not work is the fact that Americans are used to buying their cars on installment loans. And the middle class is getting crushed so badly that there are fewer and fewer people who are qualify as, for borrowing money. And so that pool of people who are capable of buying cars the way they're used to buying them is getting smaller and smaller. We're also in a stealth sort of way, we're exiting the period of having a lot of capital and moving into a period of relative capital scarcity. It's being covered up and papered over by the activities of the Federal Reserve, just printing, a lot of money. But that will have consequences too, probably in, destroying the value of the currency or some other, or market blow-ups, or they have introduced these deformities into the financial and banking system that are going to have consequences, and not good ones. Anyway, the whole transportation thing is going to hinge, or private transportation will hinge on whether people can buy cars or not. And it's looking like less and less likely. The other thing is the car industry itself. It has to operate at the giant scale in order for its business model to work. General Motors has to sell whatever it is, 7 or 8 million units a year in order to keep going. They can't survive just selling, 1.5 million units. They can't, go down, 74% in their sales and run that company the way it's been run. So I think the bottom line is, sooner or later, the mass motoring phenomenon in America is going to come to an end. And I think it's going to be sooner rather than later. There are many other things that are going on, other factors. We tend not to figure in the amount of political and economic disorder, just sheer disorder, that's being introduced into the system because of the problems that not just the COVID-19 problems, but the economic contraction that we've entered. So that has generated tremendous resentment and grievance. It's begun to translate into serious racial conflict. I'm not really convinced that a lot of that is genuine. I think a lot of it is manufactured hysteria. But you know, we're being put through it, and it is a form of disorder, and it's resulting in cities being burned down and looting and property damage and the destruction of careers and livelihoods, businesses. So, you know, that too is having its own effect, you know, along with the virus, and driving people out of cities. And that ends up creating a psychological problem for those of us who would like to see the compact, walkable city work. Because, you know, the COVID-19 has now given everybody the idea that you have to live in an environment of extreme social distancing at all times. Now, personally, I think COVID-19 is going to be a transient phenomenon. You know, it's been very harsh to live through it. I mean, it's not like the Black Plague, but, you know, it's had a lot of pretty terrible effects on our stuff and our activities.
Definitely.
But it's now given the people the idea that density is no good. So a lot of the ideas of the new urbanism have now become, you know, people have become allergic to the idea that we should live in more compact places. We're going to have to overcome that. And I think we will anyway, because, you know, reality is taking us toward that, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
You know, because the question is, you know, how are we going to really function in a human environment? And if we're not going to be mass motoring around in suburban environments, or for that matter in cities, and you know, we're going to have problems with keeping the airline industry going. You know, how are we going to function? I think the answer is we are going to have to find a way to live in walkable cities. Now, the catch is that this is all a matter of scale. You know, the big message that's coming from reality and from the future is that we have to downscale and relocalize a lot of our activities and the way we live. And the places that are going to be successful in the future are going to be the smaller places, the smaller cities that are already scaled to the realities of the future, the resource realities, the energy realities, and the capital realities, and the small towns that have this. Uh-oh, it sounds like there's some kind of a monster on the airwaves here.
I think it's a plane on my end.
Oh. But let me just say this one last thing. You know, the places that have had suffered the most disinvestment in the last 50 years are the small towns and the small cities, most of the small cities, maybe not Burlington, Vermont particularly, but certainly the ones across the middle of the country. And they've been decimated. We're also going to face a crisis with industrial agribusiness and with the food supply in America. And that tells me that the successful places are going to have a relationship between food production and the town,
which you've written about. So, James, so great to have you here.
Sorry, that was a lot. There it was.
Hold on. So I'm Richard Watts, and with Brianna, we host these Friday Transportation Live Talks, and we're honored to have our special guest, James Kunstler, the writer, social critic, thought leader. Years ago, it wasn't that long ago, we packed the Davis Center. 900 people came to hear your talk. It was really a great event for all of us. And we walked around Burlington and talked about some of the ways we fell short when you think about planning. And your book, I know you've written many books since.
Yeah.
But I've used this book in classes for many years.
Thank you.
Even though it's what did you say, 1993?
Yeah.
It still resonates with students today and with people. This way you describe what's happened to our landscape because of the automobile. A landscape of scary places, the geography of nowhere. It simply ceased to be a credible human habitat. You're talking here about suburbia, and 65% or so of us now live in suburbia. The students that we get to work with often come from suburbs. And your descriptions of that sort of empty life, being unable to get anywhere unless they had a car, just resonates today. And I wanted to kind of keep going. We have a bunch of people writing questions, and a lot of it is kind of about where you were starting to talk about what we can do in places that still have small towns,
yeah,
and village centers.
Yeah.
And you have a really nice chapter in this book about Saratoga Falls.
Springs.
Saratoga Springs, which is maybe a little bigger than some of our towns, but Vermont still has, partly because we were sort of at the end of the development, whatever, we still have 251 village centers, many with a church and a town hall and a country store and a cluster of buildings. I'm just wondering, is there some renewal possible, something here that might happen that will help these places as we think about the future?
Well, we have to remember that human societies are emergent organisms, and they follow the laws of emergence, which means that they are self-organizing. And they self-organize according to the mandates of reality, the circumstances that we are in a particular time and place in history. And what reality is telling us right now is that we're going to have to downscale our imprint on the terrain, and we're going to have to get more local. Not because we're a bunch of do-gooder environmentalists, but because our survival requires it, and the continuation of remaining civilized. We've been living in an extremely high-powered, ultra high-tech, ultra complex society for about 200 years, getting more complex by the decade for 200 years. And we've reached a kind of terminal limit for that. And we're facing, what I think is going to be a timeout from that sort of progress, if that's what it is. And I think we could use a timeout to reflect on what it is we've done, including what we've done to the planet, because this is the best one we've got to live on, despite what Elon Musk's fantasies are about moving to Mars. This planet is really best suited for human beings. And so we got to get smaller. The process is emergent. It's not going to, no one's going to sit around on a desk and draw up a plan about how to make all the small towns in America work better. It will become self-evident that there are better places to go. When the big cities are crashing and they can't pay for any of their stuff anymore, and they can't fix their transit, and the skyscrapers are all liabilities rather than assets, and the various groups are fighting over who gets to inhabit the neighborhoods and districts that retain some value, like the waterfronts and the old cores. When all that happens, there's going to be people will recognize, it will be self-evident that they better move to a place that is properly scaled. A lot of people are going to, look, not everybody's going to recognize what's happening, and they won't make that choice. They'll try to stick it out in places that are not worth sticking it out in. I wonder, what are the people going to do in Phoenix and Tucson? They can't produce any food there, really, very little. The whole place is totally automobile dependent and air conditioning dependent, and not just air conditioning dependent, but you have to have air conditioning for everybody, for all classes of people, including the poor people who, do all the scut work. They got to be air conditioned too, or you're not going to have an advanced civilization in these places. There's going to be huge demographic movements in this country, and the COVID has only, started that in a very vivid way. but it's not the end of it. And when COVID, COVID's a transient situation. When it goes away, people will still be moving around from less successful places and places that are failing to places that have some prospect of being having a future.
So let me ask you this. So we in Vermont, like in other places, are seeing people with resources generally who are leaving cities and coming here. We just did a survey where we identified, Vermont has grown, almost none in the last 10 years, but suddenly there's a sense that we might actually grow a little bit. And what could we do? If you were the governor or the administration, the one concern that planners have is that people who are coming to Vermont are going to buy houses out in the country and just sort of exacerbate our dependence on the car as a way of getting around.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Well, people make mistakes. People make bad choices, and societies make bad choices. That's one of the reasons that we're in many of the quandaries that we find ourselves in, because we made a lot of bad choices. To make the whole country car dependent was it seemed like a good idea at the time, but it has terrible consequences now. One of which is we simply don't have nice places to live in. We live in places that are completely unrewarding, and anybody who's been to a European town, once or twice, can see that very, very emphatically, right? But that's only it's only one part of it. One thing that I think is terribly important is we got to rebuild the railroad system in this country. And I've said this before. I said it at the lecture I gave in Burlington, whatever it was, 6 or 7 years ago, that we missed the window of opportunity for high-speed rail, unfortunately. That was done in Europe and in China and Japan when there was a lot of capital around. We're now entering a period of capital scarcity, but we have a perfectly good conventional railroad network that is rusting in the rain out there, and we need to repair it and refit it with rolling stock and get it going again, or we're not going to get around this country. And it's much, much less expensive to repair railroads and lay new track on existing right-of-ways than it is to build highways or fix highways. And we just refuse to do it. We just can't seem to get a workable consensus among politicians and the public itself. The public itself isn't terribly interested, although they would benefit hugely from being able to get around some other way. And Vermont had a very rich network of local rail lines, and they've been deactivated like everywhere else in the country. So that's a terribly important project. We need a project to do in this country just to demonstrate to ourselves that we're capable of doing all the other projects we got to do to keep on in this country. And the railroad project is a good one because it's easy to see that you could do it. The rights of way are still sitting there. We could still get the rail. We could still set it up and get it going, and then we could go forward with a little confidence and do some of the other things we have to do, like fix the agriculture sector of the economy, which cannot continue to rely on giantism and giant machines and giant farms and giant cow barns and giant herds, and everything's giant. And the problem with that giantism is not only that it's relying on fossil fuel or fossil fuel byproducts, but that the next biggest input into growing our food that way is capital. And if you're moving into a period of capital scarcity, the capital is not going to be there to do that.
Right.
So we got to reorganize a lot of things in American life. What we're talking about altogether is reorganizing American life. Now, personally, I think it will happen, as I said, emergently. Right. People will discover that certain things don't work anymore, and the intelligent ones will realize, oh, there are other ways of doing it. Let's say big box shopping doesn't work anymore. Malls don't work anymore. Well, you know what? Maybe I'll open a store in downtown Virgins or something like that. Maybe the next mall is maybe.
Oops.
it looks like James and Richard both lost connection. Hold on. 1 second. It looks like James lost connection.
You don't have his text, do you?
I do.
Just tell him I just re-signed in. That's what he has to do, right?
Okay.
And then we'll see if we can wrap this up here. I think I might have somebody next week, so not confirmed, but it will be a planner who will talk about what's happening in Vermont and elsewhere.
Awesome. Hold on, I'm just going to call him.
James.
Yeah.
We lost you there.
Yeah.
The corporate overlords pulled
the wonders of technology.
But can I ask you a question, because it's coming up a lot here.
Yeah.
And this is kind of where you were starting to go. You're very critical in some of your writing about planners and the planning field, and and how we really messed up the design of our towns and villages by bringing in all this road. And are you and I just want to talk about a project here in Vermont for a minute. It's the largest planning project in the county that I'm in, Chittenden County, the biggest county, and it's a study of the interstate and whether or not the capacity can be improved, and also about adding an interstate exit or two. So $600,000 or so of planning money is going in right now. And I'm just wondering how you feel about, planners and the kind of work that they're doing in general to help us out of this crisis.
They're like the generals in the Pentagon. They're always fighting the last war. So, I'm sorry, I'm echoing in my own headphones. If it was up to me, I wouldn't build another half mile of more freeway. In fact, for all we know, we might have to run light rail on the freeway rights of way. So we don't really know. But there are a lot of things that we're doing that are not particularly intelligent. We're building parking decks. Those are like 30, 40-year investments. And we don't have any reason to believe that we're going to still be driving around the way we do now 30, 40 years from now. So we're making some pretty poor investments. And, if it was up to me, I'd say we have to invest in the railroads at whatever scales. And we did have a range of railroad types back in the day, 100-odd years ago. We had light rail, we had trolleys, we had interurbans, we had the regular heavy rails, the freight rails, etc. We're going to really need badly. And we're going to have to put our energies into designing walkable communities, because that other stuff is going to fail. The suburban stuff is going to fail. The big city skyscraper megastructure cities are going to be in terrible trouble. And, that's what reality is telling us we got to do.
But I feel like we'll wrap up here, because it's even more time than we said we would get up here.
I'm sorry.
But the piece of hope you're kind of holding out there, it feels like, is that things will emerge sort of organically. We'll figure out what places that matter and that we love. And
the catch is it's going to be a whole lot different from what our expectations have been. We mainly have expected that arc of progress to keep on rolling straight up, and we were going to all be driving around like the Jetsons and flying cars and going to Mars with Elon. And, that's probably not how it's going to happen. We're going to be living in a much more austere society with a lot less capital, fewer resources, a lot of harder work, and probably a lot more rules and I don't necessarily mean laws or government intrusion, but a lot more of an armature of a social structure. Because right now we're living in a culture where anything goes and nothing matters. And that's not working. When there are no consequences for making stupid decisions and bad choices, you end up with a civilizational failure.
Yeah. James, I got to ask you one last question, because you started your career as a reporter. And clearly one of the other things that's happened in this country is the decimation of local news.
Yeah.
Deserts now. I'm wondering, A, where you get your information, and B, what do you think about also in this renewal, something about bringing back community newspapers or local reporting?
The state of news is pretty appalling. It's, well, on all levels. I mean, the national news level is atrocious, but we barely find out what's going on in our own localities anymore. And I think that will probably be an emergent process. Right now, like everybody else, I have to depend on the internet. And because I write a twice-a-week blog, I have to really comb over all the news outlets and all the different points of view. There's a tendency for everybody to go to the places that validate their own version of reality. But I try to, bust through that. I kind of think that we're going to encounter a lot of technological failures that will include the internet, the electric grid, and so that a lot of our assumptions about what we'll be able to do technologically are not going to pan out. And that might, in the sense of having a kind of forced time out from progress, that might thrust us back into earlier forms of communication. And newspapers aren't that difficult. You do need some 19th century technology. You need movable type and presses, but they still exist. It's very hard to say where that's going, but right now, the American public is so deeply misinformed that we're on the verge of, having a civil war because we're struggling so much cognitive dissonance.
James, I'm going to wrap it up now. Thank you so much. Lots and lots of comments, folks. So stay with us and go check out your blog, I would say, right? Twice a week?
Yeah, my blog comes out Mondays and Fridays around 10:15 Eastern time at www.kunstler.com. And it's a political, economic, cultural blog. I try to cover the territory.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. It really, have resonated with so many of us.
Thanks. I kind of shot my mouth off today, but there was a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I'm going to turn it back to Brianna, and she will take us home. Thanks again, James.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today to hear James speak. We hope to see you again next Friday at noon. please stay tuned to our Facebook page to see the event, and please share it so other people can know. And if you know anyone who has trouble accessing these videos on Facebook, feel free to check out our YouTube channel, which is just Sustainable Transportation Vermont. We have all of our videos up there, and we usually upload a speaker about the day of the event. So stay tuned for that. And we'll see you next Friday.